Welcome to the Murfreesboro City Council. It's November 5th, and Councilman Ronnie Martin has our prayer and our pledge.
Thank you, Mayor. Please bow your head. Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this opportunity to be together, to be with each other, and to lead as our country goes through and settles an election that I know that there's a lot of angst and anxiety about. We're very thankful to be with a group of local leaders that support each other. We're thankful for our staff, for all they do. And we're very mindful of the pandemic that we are still working through, and we pray for everybody's safety and hope that we get through that very, very quickly. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, Ronnie. Pursuant to the Governor's Order, Executive Order 54, I think that's the right one, we are conducting and have been approved to conduct electronic meetings through the end of the year. So I know Vice Mayor Scales Harris is on Zoom, and I think we have Mr. Blomley, who is also going to be presenting on Zoom tonight for some of our zoning presentations. Okay, you have 8 items on your consent agenda.
If there aren't any questions, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Scales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now go into old business. We have ordinance 20024, reassign duties of the Disabled Residents Access Committee. This is second and final reading, and building codes presented this.
So move.
Second. Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Scales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move in ordinance 20OZ32 to rezone approximately 0.66 acres along Dill Lane south of East Main Street. This is second and final reading.
So move.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Scales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, our last item under old business, ordinance 19035, amending the Water Resources Board member compensation. This is second and final reading.
So moved.
Second. Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Scales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
I want to let the council know, I don't want to surprise y'all. I'm going to bring up under other business, everything that they said about the Water Resources Board, but there's no commission that meets more and spends more time than planning. So I want to bring up under other business that if we're going to do that for water and sewer, we need to do the same thing for the planning commission. Water and sewer meets once a month, and planning commission meets, how many, Ronnie?
A lot.
Yeah.
Twice a month at least.
Yeah, and so anyway, we'll be bringing, I think those are the only 2 paid boards that we have. Isn't that correct?
I think that's it.
Yeah,
BZA.
BZA, and electric's gone
Used
now.
to, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move into land use matters. We have several items that we're going to be going over. We have under first reading ordinance 20OZ37 to rezone approximately 20.2 acres located along BZ Road and Warrior Drive.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening.
I'm Teresa Stevens, the sign administrator for the City of Murfreesboro. The item before you is a rezoning request for a planned sign overlay. COSTCO is the applicant. I wanted to begin by saying that the order in which the item is being presented may seem a little unusual. The item set for tonight's agenda was presented, as you may recall, by Matthew Blomley, Assistant Planning Director, at the last City Council meeting prior to going to Planning Commission. In order to meet notice requirements, the City Council public hearing will not occur until November 19th. And assuming approval tonight on the first reading, the public hearing will be on the same night as the second reading. We have considered other planned developments and planned sign overlays in this manner when timing is critical. A public hearing for Planning Commission was conducted last night, and the item was voted on for approval. The property is located at 1512, 1524, and 1536 BZ Road, along Warrior Drive and BZ Road. The property consists of 20.2 acres and is light industrial. A planned sign overlay district allows the use of new and innovative signs on large atypical developments. To be eligible for a planned sign overlay, the development must consist of 20 acres or more and be zoned appropriately. This property meets the requirements for the planned sign overlay district. The permanent signs that are being proposed are all attached to the building elevations, including the warehouse, car wash, and gas canopy. The car wash signs and the gas canopy signs meet the requirements our sign ordinance would typically allow. The warehouse signs exceed the maximum number of and square feet of signs allowed by the sign ordinance. The sign ordinance would allow 2 square feet per linear foot of storefront with a maximum of 3 signs and an aggregate of 450 square feet. COSTCO is proposing approximately 1 square foot per linear foot of warehouse elevation, which makes the total square feet proposed at 1,746. This is a large atypical development, and staff feels that the signs are compatible with the warehouse size and surroundings. I only brought those points out to, because if you just look at the numbers, it looks a little bit surprising, but in comparison with the size of the building, we feel it meets the requirements of the planned sign overlay. The temporary signs they have proposed are pretty straightforward. However, I did want to highlight a few of the changes. The sandwich board sign increase will be, sandwich board signs will be used on more of a permanent basis than temporary signs, and with the increase of sign face area. There's also an increase in the banner size and number with a maximum aggregate square feet. COSTCO is also requesting an increase in sign size for what we consider other temporary signs that would be used for construction only and removed at opening, not to be used again after the store opens. There are no proposed ground or freestanding signs. As noted earlier, the Planning Commission did recommend approval for the PSO on November 4th, and this is set for November 19th City Council agenda for public hearing upon tonight's approval. Eric Brand and Steve Warfield with COSTCO are here if you all have any questions.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Stevens?
Mayor, this came to Planning Commission last night. I think it was unanimous in support, so if there are no questions, I'll be happy to make a motion to approve subject to all staff comments.
All right, we have a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Thank you, Ms. Stevens. We're gentlemen who are representing COSTCO. I can't see you. Oh.
Thank you, Mayor.
We look forward to y'all coming to our community.
Thank you. Look forward to being here.
All right. All right. We want to, well, and also, so I would say this because I was just reading an article about this morning. We're really excited about COSTCO, but apparently there's a poll question on whether a Whataburger is going to come to Murfreesboro. So they could.
I'm a native from Texas, and I can tell you, you want Whataburger.
Absolutely.
I like the Whata tacos.
All right, we want to, the next thing we have is to amend the Laurelstone PRD on approximately 46.5 acres located west of Las Casas Pike and north of DeJarnette Lane. This is planning. I think Mr. Blomley is going to present this, and Mr. Blomley is,
Yes,
I see you there, Mr. Blomley. I hope you're,
Yes, I am here.
I hope everything's well with your family.
we're good. Thank you, Mayor McFarland,
Okay.
and good evening, Mayor McFarland and members of the council. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, good evening to you. Our next item on the agenda tonight is a plan development amendment for the Laurelstone plan development, which is located along the west side of Las Casas Pike. It is 46.5 acres. It's approved as a PRD back in 2017. The PRD that was approved had two types of single-family residential products, both of which are attached. There was a cottage product and a villa product. It was 199 total units was the total density on the property, which was about 4.28 dwelling units per acre. Anybody who's driven by this site over the last couple of years has seen there's been quite a bit of site preparation and site work going on, and I believe they're getting very near recording their first plat. As Goodall Homes, who is the developer, has been working on this project, they've been doing their market research and determined that they want to offer a third type of product in the development. And so they came to us, and we told them that even though they'll actually be decreasing the density of the proposed development, that it was a significant enough change to warrant an amendment to their planned development. And before I go on to their proposed concept plan, I'll just show you the areas that are, or the adjacent area directly to the west of the subject property, just to orient you a little bit more, is the Oakland Middle School, and a little bit further to the northwest is the Huntington Place subdivision, which is zoned RS10. The Pebble Creek subdivision is zoned PRD, and it's to the north of the subject property. And to the north of the subject property along Las Casas Pike is some single-family residential development in the unincorporated county. So now I'll go to the pattern book. Here is the existing approved plan. You can see that along Las Casas Pike, there are the cottage product, which is the 3 and 4 unit attached product. Those structures were going to be alley loaded and face Las Casas Pike and Old Pitts Lane. As I mentioned, what they're proposing to do is to add a different product. This product will actually be a single-family detached product. And so those homes along Las Casas Pike and Old Pitts Lane are actually going to be on single-family detached lots of about 6,500 square feet. Another thing they've also done is towards Bushman Creek, they're actually leaving more open space along Bushman Creek. And so this is one of those rare instances where we have a plan that is actually looking to decrease density, going from 199 total dwelling units to 186 total dwelling units, so 4.28 dwelling units per acre to 4 dwelling units per acre. The plan also includes the bridge across Bushman Creek and the roadway connection to Cushing Avenue in the last phase. The future land use map of the Murfreesboro 2035 comprehensive plan recommends suburban residential development, which is capped at 3.54 dwelling units per acre. Considering that the approved density is already at 4.28 acres, they're actually getting closer to the recommended density at 4 dwelling units per acre with this proposed amendment. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this matter and recommended its approval. Mr. Rob Mulchin with SEC has a PowerPoint presentation that he would like to give you before the public hearing, and I'll be happy to answer any questions either before or after the public hearing.
I didn't know if you had any questions for Matthew, so I was going to.
Nope. Mr. Mashon, actually your 3 minutes are up, so appreciate you coming up.
I hope that's a yes. Thank you, Mayor, for all members of the City Council. Rob Mulcher, SEC, and here tonight on behalf of Good Old Homes. Mr. William Gale is in the attendance, and Mr. Matt Taylor from SEC is here as well on that side. I'm going to kind of go through a brief slideshow to kind of give a little heads up. Matthew's kind of already hit a lot of the points, but I'll kind of go through it real quick for you all. As Matthew talked about, this is the original plan from 3 years ago, 199 units for about 4.28 dwelling units per acre. We had 2 lot types, which was the cottages, which are more or less a attached townhome product, and the villas, which is more or less a attached villa product on that side. As Goodall's been going through this process, they did a market analysis and felt that they wanted to include a different type of product to this. They also have Valley Brook subdivision just down the road, and they felt they didn't want to overswamp the marketplace, but they also felt they wanted to bring a new product to this project to give it a more rounded feel on that side. So what we're doing is looking at bringing this down by 13 units to get us down to more like 4.0 units per the acre on that side. So we'll go through a little bit of some talking points here. This talked about the 3 cottage, the villa, and the single-family detached product for 3 units on the proposed PRD. As you can see, the yellow areas here, this is the cottage, which is the attached townhome product, more or less here in the project. And then again, the villas along the exterior, along that northern periphery on that side. And now the inclusion of the single-family detached lots that will be a rear garage off of private alleyways that face out onto Las Casas and DeJarnette. So it's the same style of design in regards to what we had before, where we have a fronting of the homes out on the public right-of-ways on that side and the alleyway behind to take care of vehicular parking areas. Cottage lots, as we talked about, these are more or less 109 age-targeted cottages. They're not age-restricted on that side, so we're still staying with the same style of home and pricing on that side. These are 2 bedrooms with an optional 3rd bedroom. These are also all alley-loaded rear garages. It's more the style of the homes. The villa lots, this is our attached duplex model on that side. These again are 46 age-targeted type of product on that side. These are not age-restricted. Looking at these being as 2 bedrooms, an optional 3rd bedroom as well. And our new product line, which is the single-family detached lots that will front into Las Casas and Old Pitts Lane. These are 31 age-targeted for 55 and older on that side. That's what we're shooting for. They're not age-restricted, but the floor plans are more or less set up to for that 55 demographic on that side. These will have a 3 or 4 bedroom floor plan, and these would, like I said earlier, be all alley-loaded garages. It's more the architectural character of the homes. We talked a little bit about phasing. As you can see, as Matthew talked about, we're moving towards getting close to our first plat. So phase 1A on the yellow area up there is what we're working towards completing right now in regards to the construction that's been going on out there, along with phase 1B. Phase 2, as you can see in the blue, is being more or less held until we get finished with the bridge crossing across Bushman Creek to allow for that connectivity back to Cushing Avenue on that side. Amenities, more or less the same program we had before. We'll have the clubhouse for the community on that side. We'll also have community gardens, an outdoor pet park for our residents with their pets, and also the enhanced larger width sidewalk that runs along Las Casas and Pitts Lane to more or less help create an overall walking aesthetic for the development. Access, our main access point is currently under construction, almost finished and wrapped up on that side, is along Las Casas there. We've got turn lanes that are fully installed based on the commitments we made back in 2017. And then also our connection back to Cushing Avenue. And then we've also provided 2 stub streets, similarly to what we had in the previously approved plan, to provide connectivity to adjacent properties if those properties are ever so developed. And then we're also going ahead and, as our commitment before, in regards to leaving right-of-way dedication available for a connection back to Pitts Lane. If Pitts Lane was ever to be needed to be increased and or additional growth that happened along Pitts Lane, that opportunity for connectivity would be there in the future at that point in time. Just a little roadmap showing kind of our overall thoroughfare plan on that side. The purple lines you see here are 50-foot wide right-of-ways that allow for the connectivity between Cushing and Las Casas, alleviating some of the traffic burden potentially on DeJarnette, just the south on that side. The red lines are our 40-foot wide public rights-of-way. The red lines are our private alleyways, and the yellow line is our 40-foot public right-of-way. Appreciate your consideration of this amendment, and I look forward to any questions you may have now or at the public hearing.
Any questions for Mr. Malachon? All right, seeing none, we'll need to hold a public hearing for this amendment to the PRD. If you're wishing to speak for or against, if you'll come to the podium, if you'll state your name your address. If you'll keep all comments directed towards the council or any questions, we'll get those recorded, and then we'll get those answered at the end of the public hearing. If you're speaking on behalf of an individual, you'll have 3 minutes. If you're speaking on behalf of a group, you'll have 5 minutes. With that being said, anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll now consider on first reading ordinance 20-OZ31 for this amendment to the Laurelstone PRD.
Mayor, I had just one question, and maybe Mr. Mulchan or Mr. Taylor. The sewer access to this site, is it being run adjacent to 96 to give access across the street if in fact that ever happens, based on the fact that it doesn't look like we've got anything on that side of the road with the exception of Garrison Cove?
You can pull up the PowerPoint real quick. Basically, we're running it inside of all the roads.
Okay.
And the last manhole up to 96 will be about where I just marked that blue spot.
Gotcha.
And so to basically get to the right of way of Highway 96, so it can be accessible to the east side in the future at some point.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
No other questions. I move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris,
Aye.
Mr. LaLance,
Aye.
Mr. Martin,
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet,
Aye.
Mr. Wade,
Aye.
Mr. Wright,
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll now move to item 14, the plan of services and annexation for property located along Clays Mill Drive. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. Our next public hearing is for an annexation and plan of services for 2 lots in the Estates at Prim Springs subdivision. And Mayor McFarland and council, this property is the first section of the Estates at Prim Springs was actually developed in the unincorporated county. Back when it was developed about 12 or 15 years ago, due to state law that was in place at the time, we worked hard to not create islands of unincorporated county within the city limits. So the first section was actually never annexed, and it was developed in the unincorporated county. Since that time, changes in state law have enabled our legal department to rethink its stance on creating islands of county in the city limits. So there's kind of an interesting situation about how we received this annexation petition. The owner of the lot along the south side of Clays Mill Road approached us, had the property under contract, and was mistakenly under the impression that that property was already in the city limits. And one of the primary reasons why she and her family wanted to purchase that property was to be eligible to attend Irma Siegel Elementary School. After it was brought to her attention that it was not in the city limits, she petitioned the city school system for an exemption to be able to allow her children to attend Murfreesboro City Schools, Irma Siegel Elementary School. They granted her a 1-year exemption pending her making application to the city to be annexed into the city. So both Ms. Hellender, who owns the property on the south side of Clays Mill Drive, and Ms. Magna, the owner of the property on the north side of Clays Mill Drive, both want to be annexed into the city limits, and we've received petitions from both of them. In addition, the area colored in blue, which is the right-of-way of Clays Mill Drive, we have taken that to the county road board, and the county road board has consented to its annexation too. These 2 parcels are already served as outside the city sewer customers, so they're already served with city sewer. The balance of the Estates at Prim Springs subdivision is in the city limits, and the balance of what is on Clays Mill Drive, as you can see on this map in front of you, is already in the city limits. So the city's rolling services, police, fire, solid waste, are already on Clays Mill Drive. In addition, the majority of Clays Mill Drive is already maintained by the city. There's just a small portion of Clays Mill Drive that is in the unincorporated county, and the highway department is responsible for maintaining it. So from a city services standpoint, annexing these two parcels along with the roadway seems to make good sense, and especially from an emergency services standpoint, so that all the parcels that have Clays Mill Drive addresses or all the parcels that front on Clays Mill Drive will be within the city limits, and hopefully reducing any potential confusion about which jurisdiction to dispatch to serve the residences on Clays Mill Drive. At any rate, it'll be an easy annexation to effect. As I mentioned, our rolling services are already providing services to the majority of the homes on Clays Mill Drive. So the exemption from Murfreesboro City Schools does expire after this year if annexation does not go through. Ms. Hellender, who as I mentioned, lives on the south side of Clays Mill Drive, is very interested in having her property annexed. With that being said, the Planning Commission did conduct a public hearing on the annexation and the plan of services and recommended the approval of both to you. Ms. Hellender is present. If you have any questions for her, I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. As the applicant, she is present. I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing as well.
Mr. Blomley, this property, in all intents and purposes, in the city, correct?
Mayor McFarland, as you can see, directly to both the east and the west is in the city limits. As I mentioned, to the east is the Estates at Prim Springs subdivision. The right-of-way of Sulphur Springs Road is in the city limits,
yep.
And directly across Sulphur Springs Road is the Oakley subdivision, which is in the city limits. So, yes, it is sandwiched between the existing city limits.
All right, we'll need to hold a public hearing. This is for the annexation and for the plan of services. So this is just to see if we can annex it and provide services. So this is not for the zoning. Anyone wishing to speak for the plan of services and the annexation, please come forward. Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll now consider Resolution 20RPS 34 for the plan of services.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye, and I misspoke. We're not rezoning. This is just plan of services and annexation. So this is Resolution 20RA 34 annexation.
Move for approval. Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright. Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Welcome to the city of Murfreesboro.
Thank you very much.
All right. This will have to go through one more reading, so that'll be, no.
This is a resolution. It's
Okay,
just one
resolution, so welcome to the city of Murfreesboro.
Thank you very much.
We'll make sure and have your address to be able to send your tax bill now.
Already got that sewer bill.
That's right, all right. All right, we'll now move to plan of services annexation and zoning of approximately 2.12 acres located along Veterans Parkway north of Franklin Road.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. Our next public hearing is for the annexation and plan of services for two parcels that are located along the west side of Veterans Parkway. They're the two parcels colored in blue on the map before you. As you can tell, the existing city limits is directly adjacent to the property on both its south and east side. The right-of-way of Veterans Parkway is currently in the city limits, and the property to the south, we have an approved development plan for that, for a commercial center on that property to the south. These two existing parcels each contain two single-family residences. The owner of the southern parcel is the applicant for the zoning that we have next on the agenda, but he has the northern of the two parcels under contract, and it's his intent to develop these two parcels with commercial uses in the future. So there is a companion CH zoning request that we will go over later on in the agenda. With regards to the public here, the plan of services for those two parcels, it'll be a relatively easy annexation for the city to effect. As I mentioned, it is adjacent to the existing city limits, and services will be relatively easy to extend to the property. Sewer is on the property to the south and will have to be extended from the property to the south to serve the two parcels. Now, a little bit of history, and then I will get into some conditions that the Planning Commission placed on the annexation. Back in 2018 or 2019, the applicants brought the southern parcel to the Planning Commission to consider for annexation and zoning. Because it was just a little bit over an acre and was very, very narrow, we felt that its viability as a commercial lot was really in question. That the type of development that could go on such a long and narrow parcel would be very limited and could potentially have a building at the back with a parking up front and just the aesthetics of that we weren't too thrilled with. So the Planning Commission deferred action on that annexation request and directed the applicant to see if he could acquire additional properties. So this year he has come back to us and he has the property to the north under contract so that he can develop a more viable commercial development with a larger piece of property. So we still do have, and so the request for the two parcels went to the Planning Commission for annexation. The Planning Commission has recommended the approval of the annexation of these two parcels. However, they did recommend that approval conditionally. Both staff and the Planning Commission had concerns about the possibility of these two parcels having the single-family structures on those parcels redeveloped with commercial uses, which is not really desirable along a five-lane major arterial road to have single-family residences repurposed as commercial structures. So the Planning Commission conditioned the approval of the annexation, not the zoning, but the approval of the annexation on an agreement being put into place signed by the city and the applicant, requiring the applicant to remove or demolish the structures on the two parcels within a certain time period after the effective date of annexation, and to combine the two parcels via a subdivision plat. The applicant has agreed to do so and has actually, he and his attorney have been working with Mr. Ives, and in the agenda materials there is the agreement, the draft agreement that Mr. Ives has been working on, and that has actually been signed by the applicant. And they will record that document prior to second and final reading should first reading be approved tonight. The agreement gives the applicants 90 days to remove and or demolish the structures on the two parcels and to combine those two lots via a subdivision plat. And the applicant has agreed to that. And Mr. Patel is present tonight if you would like him or Mr. Roundtree, his representative, to speak in the affirmative that they are in agreement to that condition. I'll be happy to answer any questions about the annexation and the zoning, either before or after the public hearing, and I'll give a separate presentation on the zoning after the vote on the plan of services and the annexation.
Matthew, can I ask you a quick question before we get into that? Is the property that's to the south of this property that goes all the way to Franklin Road? I was just trying to scroll through here, but you may know, is it commercial highway?
Yes, sir. It's zoned commercial highway.
And does it have residents on it?
No, sir. I believe that even though if you look on this aerial photo that I have up on the screen,
Yeah.
there are There appear to be structures on there. I believe that all of those structures have since been demolished since this photograph was taken.
All right, very good. And one other question, and you might be looking at this while we're doing the public hearing, or what, if they're going to do any kind of presentation, I don't know, but do you happen to know if that property on the corner had any limitations when it got zoned to commercial highway, as far as did it back out, exclude anything? Were there some exclusions made in that piece of property? Can you try to let us know that?
Mr. LaLance, excuse me, I'm not 100% certain. I don't believe there were. I know that that further to the north near the interchange, there were restrictions placed on like Mr. McDonald's property, and I want to say perhaps the Ward property north of 840. I don't believe that property on the corner there were restrictions placed on it, but I don't recollect for certain.
Okay, I think I remember some on the Reed property that would have been just kind of right there south of the subdivision that is north of Kroger's. Do you remember that strip that went back through there? I feel like we made some changes to that, and I kind of thought this corner property had some exclusions on it as well, but I don't know if we can. I'm just curious. You know, my point is, I want to try to bring it up now, so maybe we'd have a couple of minutes to try to figure that out. But also, from just a consistency standpoint, is where I was kind of coming from on that. You know, if they've excluded, you know, the old, you know, junkyard, truck stop, whatever, from that corner piece of property, maybe it makes sense to have a similar type of exclusion on this, I guess was my point. And I don't know how we can find that out. I guess we could try to maybe find that out before second reading or something, perhaps.
Yes, sir. I could research that. Be happy to do that.
Okay.
I think that we as planning staff, you know, restrictive covenants are not something that we enforce. I think it's not a starting point for us. We try to let the zoning stand on its own merits. I know that some of the parcels up there closer to 840 were I know that those had some special circumstances being near that growing interchange. But the restrictive covenants is generally not, because we can't enforce them, is generally not something that we as staff recommend.
Okay. Very good. Thanks.
Sure.
All right, do we have a presentation? Okay, all right, we have Resolution 20 RPS 35. We need to hold a public hearing for the plan of services. Excuse me, plan of services and the annexation. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this plan of services and annexation, please come to the podium. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll now consider on first reading Resolution 20 RPS 35 for the plan of services.
So moved. Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Scales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now consider Resolution 20 RA 35 for the annexation.
Move for approval.
Second. Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Scales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Now we'll consider first reading ordinance 20 OZ 35 for the zoning of approximately 2.12 acres. Mr.
McFarland.
Blomley, can we, between now and second reading, get information on what's consistent with the other property to make sure that we have that information?
Yes, sir. I'd be glad to do that. I would like to go back to the last motion and ask if you would consider amending the motion to make it consistent with the Planning Commission's recommended conditions of approval about the agreement being in place before this would be for the annexation, the agreement being in place with the time limits as specified in the agreement.
I will make that amendment.
Okay, so we'll need to, we already have a motion where we've passed the annexation on first reading, so we'll need an amendment.
This is a resolution, so it's the only reading, so amending it now will
Okay.
just be one
Yep.
reading.
The zoning will go through second reading, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll amend the motion that I made to include the requirement to remove the structure based on what staff has agreed to and legal has
Okay.
agreed to.
Second.
All right. Will you please call the roll for this amendment to 20RA35, the annexation?
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Okay, now for first reading, ordinance 20OZ35, for rezoning approximately 2.12 acres.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. Same two parcels that we just considered for annexation. The property to the south, as I mentioned, is undeveloped. It has a approved development plan called Veterans Plaza. It's zoned commercial highway. The property directly across the street is zoned commercial highway, and it is developed with the Kroger grocery store and gas pump. And to the south, across Franklin Road, is a existing single-family subdivision in the county, and catty corner, diagonally across from on the southeast corner of that intersection is property zoned commercial highway as well. To the north and to the west of the subject property are parcels that are currently in the unincorporated county and have there's a single family residence to the north and it's vacant property to the west. The Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan recommends that the property develop as general commercial. The CH zoning district, which is what the applicants are requesting, is consistent with the general commercial recommendations of the Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan. We purposely tied the conditions regarding the existing structures to the annexation instead of the zoning because the zoning, Mr. Ives can explain conditional versus contract zoning. There are some things that we try to avoid when placing conditions on zonings. It's a little bit easier to place conditions on annexations. But at any rate, they are requesting commercial highway, which is a consistent zoning with what is in the vicinity of the property, and it's consistent with the Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan. Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this matter and recommended its approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing. Mr. Clyde Roundtree and Mr. Vijay Patel are both here if you have any questions for them as well as the applicants.
All right, any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll need to hold a public hearing on this ordinance 20OZ35. All right, anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium.
Mayor, council members, Clyde Roundtree, Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'm representing Mr. Vijay Patel on this particular piece of property. Just for clarification, he has purchased the property. It was mentioned that it was basically under contract, so he wanted to make sure he's committed to the property is what we're saying. And he's also committed to taking those homes down. He's going to move right on into the design phase upon getting the zoning approved. So it's really not pretty much a moot point. He's committed to taking the homes down. The duration of time, the 90 days, is that going to be an issue, Vijay? Is that fine? So he's in agreement with that as well. So I just want you to have that assurance that he's moving forward versus speculating on the property and just kind of holding his position. And Mr. LaLance, to your concern, there is a plan already for that corner on 96 and Veterans. All we ran into as far as a restriction was where the gas pumps had to be located. There's a distance requirement related to residential, so it became a little bit of an issue because what was going on across the street. So your mind's triggering something. And I think you're right, that I'm not sure if it got into a restrictive covenant, but we ran into some issues with how that was designed. And then the other thing that Mr. Patel has done that we're trying to do on this particular piece of property is minimize the amount of access points onto veterans. So he's providing cross access. He's approached the adjacent property owner to provide cross access as well, because the planning staff wanted us to do that. That adjacent property owner hasn't committed to that, but we are showing a stub for, as we go down the line. There is a traffic signal that's going to be coming in, 2 more lots down, I believe. So the goal is to try to minimize the amount of access points on veterans. So he's been very cooperative. We also know that we've done some master planning behind this development. There's a big old piece of land that's going to come into play. So we're sensitive to the fact that there may be movement on the backside of his property to get us to Franklin Road without having to go out to veterans. So there's been this is a hot corner. There's been a lot of eyes on it. Staff's been very concerned, making sure we're trying to respect the overall direction that the development's going. So Mr. Patel's been great to work for, and he's been more than willing to kind of meet the expectations the staff has had. So thank you.
All right, any questions? Excuse me, I need anyone else wishing to speak. All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and will now consider for first reading ordinance 20 OZ 35 to zone approximately 2.12 acres.
So moved.
Do we need to make the same motion related to the period of time for the zoning that we did the annexation? Does it need to be in there, or are we good with that?
Mr. Martin, that condition would not need to be placed on the zoning. We specifically attached that condition to the annexation instead of the zoning to make things less complicated. It was a little bit easier to attach to the annexation instead of the zoning.
I'll second. Thanks.
All right, we have, do you have a question?
I'll wait till second reading.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Abstain.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll now go to resolutions. We have Resolution 20R24, Omnia Partners Cooperative Purchasing Agreement. This is brought by purchasing.
Right. Mayor, this is a request by council to consider allowing the use of Omnia Partners Cooperative Purchasing Agreement. Omnia was created with a merger of 2 purchasing alliances, one of which we had an agreement with. And this resolution will allow us to use the newly formed entity as a cooperative purchasing alliance. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
If there aren't any, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. I'd like to ask that number 17 be pulled off of the agenda, please, unless there's any. Okay.
Okay.
Number 18, approval of interlocal cooperation agreement. Chief Oaks.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Before you tonight to present an interlocal agreement that would replace the interlocal agreement with Rutherford County EMS dated December of 2016. This interlocal agreement comes to you first for approval, and then would go to the county commission for their approval, working things out with Rutherford County EMS on an agreement to enhance emergency medical services in the city as well as across the county. There's several things that are in this agreement that kind of enhance the level of service that we're providing or able to provide. Within that, it's increasing the amount of times that our Quality Assurance and Training Committee meet from quarterly to monthly. It establishes a protocol committee. It establishes a resolution for potential conflict resolution and how those are handled within the agreement. So all of that is in writing. As well as it establishes some agreements within the communications parameters and puts the responsibility on Rutherford County EMS about transferring calls to our call center, which was agreed to by Rutherford County EMS and Director Clark, the Public Safety Director. And so Director Hudgens, Director Clark, and I sat down together with Assistant Chief Wright from our EMS division, and we really tried to get a lot of the differences resolved and together, just resolving a lot of those things. And I think that we, working with that, as well as sitting down with Dr. Galloway and working out a lot of misconceptions when it came to the protocols and some of the patient care things that were going on, has resulted in us being able to come to this agreement. And we feel like that it's an agreement that we can cooperatively work together for the citizens of Murfreesboro to provide very much so enhanced emergency medical services.
Any questions? I wish I could make a motion, but I can't make a motion.
Move for approval.
Yeah, I'll second and just say, man, I appreciate it. I got this and got a chance to kind of breeze through it. I didn't really read every word of it, but I saw the protocols committee. I think that's a great idea. I mean, that's outstanding. And a lot of this stuff, I think, really addresses the issues. Seems like this will knock out 95 or how, you can't get 100, but it seems like this will knock out so many of the issues that we've been having. It'll make, the care better as far as emergency, the emergency care we provide our citizens better is going to be better than it used to be. I mean, so it looks like in the end here, we're going to achieve some good stuff, and I appreciate it, Chief. So I'll second the motion.
And Chief Bowen is working with Director Clark, and all the PSAPs within the county are working together separately on a committee to address some of the issues with transferring of calls and things like that. So I think a lot of good resolutions are going to come about as far as the communications issue. And Director Clark and Director Hudgens both have committed to resolving those dispatch issues and getting those calls transferred as well.
Awesome. Thank you all for working hard on that. All right. If you'll call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We now have a joint use agreement with Consolidated Utility District for 700 megahertz digital radio system tower site. Chief, it sounds like we've got a lot of people who are going to be using our towers.
There's a lot going on, definitely. First of all, good afternoon or good evening, Mayor, members of the council. You'll see the next 6 items are mainly have to do with communications and radio towers. And Bill Terry has been instrumental in each of these projects. And I'm going to invite him forward to go over each with you. And then if there are any questions that you have afterwards, we'll be glad to answer them. Bill.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. The joint use agreement with CUD it came about when we built the first 4 towers in 2014. We looked at property in the city to be able to place our towers, on city-owned property where we could. Unfortunately, on the east side of town, the only property we had was some Murfreesboro Water, had a tank on Wholesale Pike. Unfortunately, the elevation wasn't quite right, and the property wasn't quite large enough to support both the water tank and the tower. We then reached out to MTSU to potentially try to put something on their farm out of Guy James. Through negotiation with them, we were not able to put a tower on the right elevation. The property that they offered us was down kind of at the corner of Guy James and I believe Brown's Mill. Just wasn't conducive for a radio tower. Then we met with CUD to look at their property. Great piece of property, elevation's right, everything was really good with the exception of they had like 5 or 6 different easements on this property, and it turned out they were unable to actually allow us to use the property. CUD Legal went back. They worked with David Ives to shore up the easements. They were able to get all of the 5 easements brought into one, which gave them the authority to allow us on that property. So we finally pushed all that through. CUD board approved this agreement in July. We've kind of held it waiting for CIP the funding to become available so that we could just bring this all at one time. And that's basically where we are tonight. It's not so much that everybody's going to be using our towers. We're obviously offering CUD the ability because we have the capacity on the radio system with the joint use that we now have with the county. We're hoping to expand this out to, we've talked to Middle Tennessee Electric. Middle Tennessee Electric's going to be on this since they purchased MED, and we were planning for MED anyway. County schools, city schools have now reached out. We're going to, I believe they're going to buy radios for their buses to start with. So system's growing, but it's growing at a good place.
All right, any questions? All right,
There are none, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll now move to consider a tower site construction contract with Motorola for the 700 megahertz digital trunk radio system.
This basically follows in suit with what you just approved.
Okay.
With the agreement in place, now we can move forward with construction. We sat down with Motorola. Since they have begun, they're pretty much the sole provider for the state of Tennessee now for the state TACAN system. They have now put pretty much their entire level of services on state contract. So we sat down with them, negotiated the price off state contract. The number that you see is very much, well, it's almost exactly in line with what the other 4 towers cost us back in 2014. So they've given us a really good proposal on this tower. Tower includes the actual tower site, the building, generator, fire suppression. The only additional costs that we would potentially see for the tower site will be getting electricity to it, permitting and application fees.
Okay. All right, do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Item 21, approval to purchase NICE redundant IP logger and AIS server system.
Okay, we're just continuing on the radio theme here. This piece of hardware, software, currently Rutherford County Emergency Communication District provides the logging capability for both police and fire for the analog radio system and the 911 telephones. They have been doing this for well over 20 years now. With the movement that we're going with digital radio system, the digital system now exceeds the capacity of what ECD has been able to provide us in the past. When we sat down with them and talked about what we needed to do, basically they told us that they had been providing this more as a courtesy because they had the capacity on their system, but they were not ready to start supplying that to the PSEPs because since each of the PSEPs had their own radio system, Smyrna, Laverne, Murfreesboro, Rutherford County, we were all kind of on different systems. So again, we reached out to Motorola to see what was on state contract pricing that would fit right into our system. The pricing came back what we felt was reasonable and correct for the type system we're putting in. This gives us the ability to record every radio channel, and it gives us the additional ability to capture the data from the radios as well. So as far as being for investigative purposes and transparency, it gives us a lot more than what we currently have. In essence, we're moving from a 6-channel system to a 22 talk group system. The 22 talk groups gives us expanded coverage and expanded capacity. But this logger handles everything that we have now, so we won't have to come back and we don't have to expand it. We don't have to add to it. The capability is to record, it will hold 150,000 hours of recording, and it has an additional 500,000 hours of long-term archiving. So well within what our retention rate is for any type of recording that we might have to have. And this is the final piece of the puzzle. So we don't have to come back and ask for anything else on the radio side. This is the last piece.
Any questions?
So moved.
Second. Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Item 22, approval to purchase computer-aided dispatch interfaces for station alerting and 911 protocol call handling.
Council's previously approved the locution fire alerting system for fire stations to create that automated dispatch. We waited to do the interface until the locution system was purchased, and we began the provisioning piece. This piece adds the automated functionality to it, takes some of the pressure off the dispatcher. With the interface in place, once a telecommunicator commits the call to go out, locution takes over. At that point, it actually voice generated will tone the stations, read all the information that fire needs for the fire medical calls. They'll hear the same computer-aided generated voice for every dispatch. They get the exact same information for every dispatch going out, so you don't have the human factor in there where they could miss something. Computer takes it and away it goes. And then the dispatcher then can concentrate on the actual arrivals and monitoring the fire scenes. The protocol piece, the next item on the agenda is the actual protocol software. We just included both the interfaces on the same request since it's being bought off the same master agreement. With the if you approve the protocol software, the interface for that brings in, call takers will actually take the call in the protocol system, which backfeeds the CAD system. So as they're answering the questions that they ask the particular person calling for service, it'll fill in the CAD screen. It prompts them for the different questions, and as they work through the process, it picks the call for service code for them.
We'll have a separate motion, though, on each of the items, right?
Well, the interfaces are the same, so they're off of one master agreement. So I believe you can just approve. I guess I shouldn't. That's Adam's job.
Yeah, do we need motion on
22 and
22 and 23 separately?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
All right.
You were just basically pointing out that we need to do 23 if we do 22, right? I mean, okay.
Instead of doing two separate interface requests, we put
Gotcha.
them on the one.
Okay, I'll make a motion on item number 22 that we approve it.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet. Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
All right, we'll now move to item 23.
I move for
Approval to purchase, hold on a second, approval to purchase public safety protocol software. I got to get that, I got to get that in for the record.
Sorry, I thought you were stopping at 23. Yes, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet. Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now move to item 24 to approve workstations for Special Investigation Division.
Yes, sir. Request your approval of agreement with Alfred Williams using Omnia Partners to purchase workstations, chairs, and different furniture items for SID. The approximate cost of the purchase is $102,000, and it'll be funded from the felony fund.
Any questions for Chief?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Terry, thank you for your hard work on the interlocal agreement with Chief Folks as well. Thank you. All right, we'll now move to upgrade Murfreesboro Water Resources Department's customer information system software to the most current version.
Mayor, City Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak before you this evening. Two items. First item being an upgrade from our it's advanced utility system. It's called our CIS, Customer Information System Infinity. This is our utility billing software that also integrates with an interactive voice response where we can do call outs to campaigns when we have messages for the public, our ratepayers, or if we have cutoff potentials for their water. But the benefits, we've been on version, well, I don't want to get ahead of the timeline. The benefits to this upgrade is basically it's going to be faster. It's going to interface more powerfully with an advanced interface manager, reduces the size of the database, has some pre-billing exception processing functionality, again, customization, scheduler, and allows our implementation of a role-based security at the business layer level. So, stronger, faster, smarter. It's where we want to go. And we've been on version 3 since June of 2014. That was our installation date. We went from a COBOL, the old blue screen we called it, to state-of-the-art, off-the-shelf product with AUS. We did our AMI, our advanced metering infrastructure, wireless water meters in June of 17. If you recall, we did have a defacement that occurred on our online customer access portal last year in August. We did go through an after-action report, and we did correct that vulnerability very quickly. No customer data was hacked or compromised, but we have, out of an abundance of caution, just kind of slow-walked the upgrade since that event occurred. No real urgency other than we've been on the old version for 6 years. And we do have it budgeted for $300,000, and the total upgrade cost is $280,000. So we would just recommend your approval to move forward with that upgrade.
Move for approval. Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move to a boundary amendment for number 7 for Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Resources, and this is in the consolidated utility district service area.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Again, the exhibit you have before you, we've kind of got it shaded in two different, one's crosshatched in blue and the other is a light blue. This is an area that's currently in the Murfreesboro Water Resources, our water service area. As you know, we have a distinct and independent water service boundary that is not aligned with the city limits. That was based on a lawsuit back in the mid-'80s where federal courts told us that our water district boundary had to stay confined and no longer take over CUD customers due to their federal loans. So that background being, but occasionally we find that there are areas that are just better served by CUD, and in like-mindedness, there's also better areas that sometimes CUD transfers to us because our infrastructure is available. This is one of those areas. That area that's crosshatched in blue, that is a step system that was approved back in 2017. That's actually going to be a step system that's been operated by Murfreesboro Water Resources. We had been working with the developer for over a year to try to get off-site water line easements. He was unable to get those. We were satisfied with the level of diligence that the developer used and the offers he made to get those off-site easements. However, he was unsuccessful at the end. CUD does have the ability to provide fire protection. So we believe that it's in the city's best interest, CUD's best interest, and the developer's best interest to allow CUD to provide water service to that area. The other areas in dark blue, these are county properties that are not annexed into the city. but they're pre-existing developments. You can see there's a cell tower, the Islamic Center of Murfreesboro, and Grace Baptist Church, and the two residential lots on the west side of Manchester Pike. There is an existing structure there. They're already currently served by CUD. They're in the county. Don't see much potential for redevelopment here since there's already existing developments there. So we also believe that this would be a prime candidate for transfer to CUD's water service area. So I'm open for questions if you have any. It would cost us a significant amount to get to these locations if we tried to service them for fire protection.
I move for approval. Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gore.
Mayor, if I could, I just want to
Sure.
tell Darren thanks for all the hard work he's done the past 30, 45 days as we've been kind of working through a lot of the odor stuff. I know he's worked hard on that, and I think been a great ambassador for the community, so I just want to tell you thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
All right, we have several permits or licensing requests. Ms. Wright?
We do. We have a new gas station owner and name change at 817 Northwest Broad Street. That application is in order, other than they do need to finish their building codes inspections. We have a restaurant that's moving from a on-site to a combined retail, which would allow them to have growlers to go. And so that's a permit type change at 2243 Medical Center Parkway, Suite B. In addition to that, we have a special event permit that you've already approved once for a fundraiser for Oakland's that they need to expand because of COVID and their size restrictions for serving their patrons. We did not charge them an application fee to request this. They asked to go from one event night to 3 in a row so they can spread out their participants. So if that's approved, that all of those would be able to be issued tomorrow except for the gas station, which still needs to finish their codes inspection.
Any questions?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Could I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
Just on this, I haven't noticed, I'm assuming, I think I know what it is, but on the background check, there's a bunch of codes there. That,
Those are traffic violation
they're
tickets.
just traffic, the T, right? But, so, okay,
I
yeah.
checked.
Can we make people start going to traffic school if we see that there's a lot of things before they can get a beer permit?
If you develop a traffic school, I'm sure we can do that.
I was just being sarcastic.
May be needed.
Yeah, no doubt. See some of these come across. All right, we have no board and commission appointments. I think we have a statement to be paid. Mr. Tucker?
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. I come before you this evening requesting authorization to pay an invoice for legal services. This is an invoice from Bradley Aaron Bolt Cummings, and they are representing the city in connection with the lawsuit brought by the Charles Ferrer Partnership. The amount of this invoice that I'm requesting payment this evening is $15,925.82. And as I have communicated to you, staff will be coming forward probably at the next council meeting with a budget amendment to fund these legal services on an ongoing basis.
Okay. Any questions? Can we get approval to pay this statement?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we have under other business, donated leave employee handbook policy 1044. Ms. Russell.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Staff requests approval of Employee Handbook Policy 1044, donated leave. Donated leave program, which the city doesn't have right now, would allow employees to donate accrued leave to be used by fellow employees who experience medical emergencies and that have exhausted all of their paid leave. These types of leave programs play a role in increasing productivity and improving retention for employees. The cost is marginal. Some donors may have, their pay may be more than someone else's, but we think that that will all equal out. But we will look at it and make some determinations if that changes.
Okay. Ms. Russell, I want to say before we vote, thank you to you and Craig Tyndall for working on this, but also to Matt Harvey, who's been with us for several years at the police department. This was his idea, and he pushed this for quite a while, especially with several of the officers who had been diagnosed with cancer, and they really wanted to be able to help their officers by donating their leave time. So, Chief Bowen, thank you all for continuing to push this through, and I think a good way for our employees to be able to donate to other employees, not just by their prayers and thoughts, but by really saying, hey, you can have some of my sick time. So it's pretty good deal.
It is. Can I ask, this is a kind of a technical question, but I just want to make sure we've kind of thought through it a little bit. Are we saying that we're able to donate to a specific person, or do we
Yes.
donate to a pool and then someone else makes
You
the
can donate to
decision?
a specific person. We looked at a lot of policies, and we talked to a lot of different municipalities, and everybody does it a little bit differently, but there was some consensus that if you're able to donate to a specific person, people are more apt to donate to somebody that they know.
Okay.
I'll just,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's a great thing, so thank you. We've got a place where I work at a place where you could do something similar, and I participated in that year. I gave some time this year, and rather than lose that time, it felt really good to do that, especially with what's going on. So I think it's a great thing.
All right, any questions?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we now have a proposal to engage professional financial services for the review of the MED pension plan.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I come before you again this evening asking for you to approve a contract with Cowden Associates for actuarial services related to the Murfreesboro Electric Department pension plan. As you're aware, the city retained administration of the plan after the sale of the electric department to Middle Tennessee Electric Membership Corporation, and staff believe that it's appropriate at this time to have a review of the past administration of the plan. Cowden is a leading independent compensation, health and benefits, and retirement consulting firm that serves clients regionally, nationally, and internationally. The contract would be, we would be billed at an hourly rate for services for an amount not to exceed $60,000.
Okay.
Thank you.
We've had a lot of discussion with this over the last months. Councilman Martin has been extremely involved in it. I want to make sure that the retirees who are watching this is about as fast as I've ever seen anything go through government as far as getting proposals and get something out. So I want y'all to know who are watching this that we're going through step by step all the things that we're supposed to go through to be able to get this information back. So specifically Ms. Shepard, and I know there's several people who are emailing us. We're doing everything as quick as we possibly can. So thank you, Mr. Tucker.
You're welcome.
Any questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right. Under other business, I've got a couple things I want Mr. Tucker, what can we pass where you have areas that were designed for schools that were designed for pedestrian access, but not for people to park in the roads and block the streets to pick their kids up? I mean, the drop-offs are at the front and sides of the schools, not in neighborhoods. How do we fix that?
That's an excellent question, and certainly something that we can look into, and an issue as a parent at an elementary school in Murfreesboro. I'm very familiar with the issue, and it's something that we can look at in terms of and we'll have to work with Murfreesboro City Schools too in terms of queuing.
Well, no, I would like, and I want to hear council's opinion on this. Like, I think outside of the schools,
Right.
specifically say what we're dealing with in Southern Meadows, over in Bellwood, and over Siegel, those subdivision streets were not meant to be pick-up and drop-off zones, because you can't get in, you can't turn around, you're having to get in people's driveways and back and forth. So, queuing and all those things, I would rather us be able, what ordinance can we pass that says
Don't do it.
it's illegal to be able to use these streets to park there during these times of the days for pickup? I mean, I would, because, I mean, for years we've talked about this, and what happens, the principals will let the parents know, we'll enforce it at the beginning of school, and then people won't do it, and then it just starts happening again. And it's really not fair to the people who live in those neighborhoods. They can't even get in and out of their streets during the day, in the mornings specifically. So can you come up with something that will say you can't do it, period, and give the police the ability to, if we need to put signs up, but they need to have the ability that they can write tickets to not do it.
Are you talking about parking and dropping off, or queuing?
No, so we have.
I'm confused.
Yeah, so we have, with what Pete talked about specifically, I think it's Bishop and Siegel. At Siegel you have a turnaround, but there's a wire that used to be there to keep people from coming and having a drop off. So what's happening, people are parking in the residential streets behind the schools and using that as a pickup and a drop off.
Okay.
So,
And the kids are walking through the yard, they're sitting there parked there for 30 minutes before school ends. They walk over there, they bring them into school and drop them off, and it's just not.
And it's not the situation where it is the place where schools have told parents, this is where you line up.
No.
Okay, I understand the issue now.
It would basically be like pulling to the back of a business and dropping somebody off so they don't have to go through the front door, and they can not have to go through the line like everybody else does.
I understand. We can work on that.
Yeah, if y'all get with Chief Bowen, if we need to get whatever the legal recourse is that we want to, if we need to put signs up to notify, hey, you can't do this, and then we need to give y'all whatever authority you can.
We need to be prepared as we do this, though. I mean, they're there for a reason. They're there because there's not enough room to stack all the cars in the parking lot of the school. So, we kind of have an issue, especially with like a school like Bellwood that's a little bit older. We would hope it wouldn't be an issue with Siegel, but it is. And so we can't, the alternative may be that they're out there on Middle Tennessee Boulevard or out there on Thompson Lane, which isn't real great either. So it may be important for us to coordinate that. Look, I'm telling you right now, I'm with you. We need to quit having people park in front of people's driveways and blocking them in, and then everybody's in a fussing, screaming match about trying to get out of their own driveway in the mornings and every afternoon. It's not right. But we also probably need to do this where we've coordinated the effort a little bit with making sure, if we've got a stage, we got to work with, the schools, the school director and, Mr. Anderson and them. Yeah, Ralph and Mr. Anderson that, Ringstaff, sorry, Mr. Ringstaff. That if we've got to stagger the start times, whatever, but we got to make this happen. I mean, it's getting bad. Some of the stuff I'm hearing is pretty bad, so
But
I'm with
those,
it.
from a planning standpoint, those were initially designed for the residents of those neighborhoods to be able to walk, either that or, even the residents maybe to be able to access. But what's happened, through the ones that I saw for the last 10 days, I mean, you have people who now are using those that are not in the neighborhoods that, are now, hey, that's my shortcut to be able to go. So let's try to find that. Y'all know what the issue is. We've dealt with it for quite some time, but I mean, I guess publicly we're saying, one, don't do it, and two, give us the ability to be able to give you the tools to say, stop it, so Pete and his residents know we're serious about fixing it.
Okay. Mayor, if I could add one other comment to that too. I think too, I don't know how big of a part of the problem this is, but I think some of it I have heard are neighborhood residents driving their kids there, especially in poor weather, so that they don't have to walk during that. So be mindful of that too, because I think even if you live in the neighborhood, it still doesn't give you the ability to go and park in front of someone else's street. So, parents will have to make that decision from the standpoint of if they want their kids to walk, they're going to have to be able to deal with that environment, just like we wouldn't want somebody driving into the neighborhood to take that shortcut. So it's all part of the problem.
Okay. Thank you.
Go, I don't know what the Star Trek thing is, but live long, fix it, and prosper, so you can do it.
Make
All
it
right.
so.
I have two more, and then I know Rick has something as well. I told y'all I've had lots of time to walk and over being in quarantine, but for years we've talked about traffic calming in Murfreesboro. So I was in Greenville, South Carolina again 3 weeks ago, and you can't drive anywhere in a neighborhood without there being the rubber speed bumps in the neighborhood. And I know we put a plan in place. Mr. Griffith did that a couple years ago, but there are areas, specifically Regency Park Drive, Alexander Boulevard, Blaze Drive. I'm thinking of the ones on the west side of town that we've gotten issues. So, I was walking the other day, and, Regency Park Drive has no sidewalks, and you about put your life into your own hands walking on Regency Park Drive in a neighborhood because people are driving so fast. And same thing with Alexander. Luckily, Alexander has sidewalks. But legally, I understand how we have to go through a process with traffic calming, but I don't understand why we can't in intersections. If you have an intersection on a road that we consistently have, River Rock was my other one that we have lots of issues on River Rock. It seems like we should be able to go on the main way of traffic, so River Rock would be coming from Cason Lane to go into 99, and find where the intersection is. There's different intersections where typically there's a manhole cover right in the middle of the intersection, and just put a speed bump right in the middle of the intersection. And because we don't have the time or the resources to be able to have a police officer sit out on River Rock on Regency Park, and the speeding has gotten horrible. So I would like to find some way that we can put down the rubber speed bumps, and if people complain in the neighborhoods, then we can just say, look, we've had X number of complaints in these neighborhoods. When people stop speeding, we'll take the speed bumps up. So I don't know how the council feels about that, but we've talked about speed bumps for years, and we can't seem to get anywhere. I think since we've done the traffic calming, Mr. Huddleston, I hate to put you on the spot, but how many speed bumps have we done since we've had the traffic calming?
None that I'm aware of that have been implemented, but a couple of areas have been studied for speed tables and similar to a speed bump.
Yeah.
It's got the plateaued top. Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm all in, y'all. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm in. I mean, it is ridiculous in some areas, and we just got to do something. So, I mean,
they're not, the old speed bumps that you'd make out of asphalt, they were loud. The new speed bumps are not loud. I mean, they're rubber, and so they almost give when you go over them. But, I think I would be willing in other areas of enforcement that we have that have been a topic of debate. I would rather get rid of those and actually put speed bumps where, it would slow people down in neighborhoods where people shouldn't be driving so fast. So I don't know legally what we have to do, but it seems like it's a no-brainer to me.
I mean, I think we just ask Chris. I mean, we need to get with Chris, Sam, whomever, and, we know, Jim, I mean, whoever would be involved in that, we kind of know some of the areas, and we could all probably come up with some, but
Brad Miller.
Police department would probably know some good spots where they would commonly get calls for complaints. Maybe we should use that as a.
Brad Miller on.
Why don't we do a test to see how this does and see if we actually get the response that we're expecting and what kind of time frame we're dealing with it, and then, do a.
Yeah, we don't have to go putting 100 out. I'm just, put 4, 5, or 6 or whatever and see what happens.
A good example, there's no traffic speeding on a section of Regency Park Drive and Banner Drive because there's the dips in those where you have the.
You're gonna pay a price.
Yeah, so you don't speed on those streets, but could y'all, Brad Miller emailed me yesterday. He's a gentleman who lives in the Cason Lane area, lives on Three Rivers, and he's talked to us quite a bit about how bad the speeding is on that section of Three Rivers because it's a cut through from Highway 99 over to Kimbrough. I guess what I'd like to ask is, can we put a pilot program in place to say,
we'll take a look at that.
We're going to try one area, we're going to put speed deterrence up and see how that works.
And I'm open to it as well. I think staff obviously will do this, but I think the awareness of once we start that, where does it stop? And it's going to open the gate. And so how do you make the determination? And
I think we need to have some metrics. We would ultimately, I think, need to have some metrics where, the complaint numbers and stuff like that. And there's, I think, like one of the things, like to me, you wouldn't put one on Haynes Drive.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's there's a lot of speed, and it's terrible speeding through there. People just fly through there, but that's, whatever the name of that road is, a connector or a,
arterial.
Arterial, that we would only use it for kind of more of the neighborhood type or whatever, those types of streets that are maybe being used for cut-throughs would be my probably preference of where we would start, just for what it's worth.
You could go through and name, a ton of them just from the west side of town, maybe some even, downtown where there's some that, you just know where if you walk on those streets or especially ones that don't have sidewalks, that, are in the middle of a neighborhood that and we just paved Regency Park Drive was not that bad because the road was in such bad shape because it was failing, but now that it's paved, it's like a racetrack going through there.
Are there surrounding communities that have done this? Could we get some feedback maybe to see what their experience has been with this?
Yeah, we've got that where we did the traffic calming program, but the thing with the traffic calming program, I think it gave residents the ability to be able to do the speed bumps, but the problem, it's a pretty high threshold that you have to go through from a petition type deal to be able to get those put. And, because no one wants one right in front of their house, but if you put it in the middle of an intersection where there's really not homes that are close to it, it probably would make less noise than it would be driving over a manhole. So, Sam.
Mayor, just a little bit of background information. You guys will remember this, but we did present a policy, has a lot of the guts of what you're talking about in it, where they go, streets that they'd be appropriate on, streets that are not, wouldn't be appropriate based on the classifications. We did sample some of the other communities. Metro has a very robust program, but they also have 600 square miles of community that they're responsible for. Our program was based on a inquiry and then consensus and then sharing in the price, and that's the nuts and bolts of it for the communities that brought it up as a complaint. And we've studied several areas, met with the residents and went through that process. And I'm not sure that we've implemented any. I'm not aware of any, but we have studied, I think, at least a half a dozen specific streets and had some recommendations on programs to do there. So, you know, it's something we can look more into, the acceptance and funding. The metrics, I think, include a traffic study and maybe even a speed study to help quantify, is there a real issue or is it a perceived issue? And those are all critical elements that lead you up to make the right decisions about traffic calming. And then, of course, the next thing would be the funding of those.
The only thing I would question on that, and the funding, I mean, we put those in commercial developments, probably a little different, but we put those all the time to slow down. Kurt knows it, but we just need to be careful when we're using ticket metrics on whether people are speeding or not, because it's hard.
Well, it wouldn't be the ticket metrics necessarily. It would be based on an actual traffic count and then a speed study, which collects speed data in the neighborhood, so we know,
Those little cables.
The cables, you know what the average car is doing, you know what the 85 percentile is of the typical speed through there, and that gives you some metrics on to actually compare it to the posted speed limit and the driving conditions, and then you can make a decision about is this an isolated problem or is it a recurring problem that traffic calming would help mitigate.
Okay.
So I'll ask our.
I've got all these things now that after having 14 days of sitting around.
Go back to work, maybe.
Too much time.
Yeah. Now we're going to talk full-time mayor next. I mean, just kidding. So, all right, thanks.
I'll ask our traffic engineering staff to update us on those elements, and then if we need to consider some modifications and more robust program, we'd certainly bring that back to you.
So we've solved speeding, parking, and drop off at schools.
School drop off.
Anything else that we need to?
I got some.
All right, Rick.
World peace is next.
That's right.
So we've been talking about the sign ordinance, and most of what we've been talking about is, kind of the real estate signs, the auction signs, that sort of thing. This election has brought up kind of a new something for me, where particularly one individual who's running for a U.S. seat has been putting signs everywhere in the right-of-way. I mean, all up and down the median and on Broad Street, all in the landscaping around the square and places where you're not supposed to put it, all over on school property, and I don't know. We've been talking about, and this is kind of, the reason I bring it up is because we've been having this conversation about, well, okay, we're going to pick their sign up and then they're going to pay for it if they come get it and all that kind of stuff. But I started thinking about the idea that someone would go down through Broad Street and put them in the median. Our people got to go through there and pick them up. Our people had to go around the square twice a day to pick all of them up every day from the primary all the way through the daggum regular election. I mean, if everybody who was running for an office did what this guy did, this place would be littered with signs. It would be dangerous. They're right in intersections. They're right in the cut-throughs of the median. We got to figure out what we got to do. In my opinion, I wish I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I'd like to hear what you guys say, but we got to figure out what we got to do to make sure that doesn't happen again for me. I mean, I just think that is, first of all, I think it's terrible taste and bad form. But secondly, it's creating a whole lot of work for our staff members. That's a bunch of taxpayer dollars that are having to follow this dude around and pick up his signs out of the right of way. And I'm out on that. I mean, I never did it. Just go stick a sign somewhere where it wasn't supposed to be and expect somebody else to come pick it up and then go stick one right back there after somebody else went and picked it up. So, I'm going to get that out there. If you guys think that we want to make sure that doesn't happen again, and I know there's some issues with candidate signs or whatever, as far as where we can tell them to put them or not, I have a sneaky suspicion we can say don't put them in the right of way, and we're okay on that legally. So, I'm up for figuring out a way that if there's more than 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, or some number, that it's a fine right off the bat. It ain't so I know it's probably hard to do legally and all that kind of stuff. I'm just telling you what I'm up for. And y'all think about that. I'm just getting it out there. We got time before the next election comes, so.
Yeah, we can take a look at, about 3 years ago, the legislature did take away from the city's ability to regulate some degree of political signs. There's also a careful balance there with free speech and in the political process that cities have to be cautious of, and if we overstep, the legislature is going to step in and not allow us to do anything. Generally, we are very cautious about signs being put somewhere that obstructs views for traffic purposes and things like that. But we try, I think, every 2 years to be somewhat cognizant of the fact that they're out there, they're part of the political process, part of what we have to allow people to do from a free speech standpoint. So it's a little less regulated than commercial signs, for example. But there are people who take advantage of that, and those are easy to spot and take care of. We just have to watch that balance pretty carefully.
I just don't, look, the thing that gripes me about it is, again, I think it's bad taste, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But only because you got to understand that you're spending taxpayer dollars
Right.
to run around and pick those things up. And I don't think it's right. I don't want to be spending our resources doing that. And so whatever that takes, whatever we can figure out to make that happen or not happen, I'm sorry, next time, I'd be up for it. And if that's, you know, I don't want to cross any lines, obviously, right? I mean, you know, look, I
Worry
don't.
about the snowball effect.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can promise you this. Next election, if we don't do something about it, it's going to be worse. Because I already saw it go from 1 to 2 in a matter of the last 2 or 3 weeks, where all of a sudden someone else started putting signs right in those same areas, right beside the signs that were sitting there.
Yeah.
And it, you know, so next time it's just going to be, well, I can promise you, I mean, you know, why wouldn't you? And why wouldn't all 17 people running for whatever seats are open at that time start doing it? And then we got a real mess. So,
Well, Craig,
anyway,
I talked
that's
to Robert Holt about it because somebody called me Sunday. Somebody put signs on Medical Center Parkway.
Yeah.
From the Chamber all the way down to Thompson in the median.
yeah, and all the way down Broad
We
Street.
had somebody go out there to take them down.
Yeah, that's our
About 30
resources
signs.
getting spent. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
Well, and that's not, you know, the other thing you have to think about, you hate to think from the negative standpoint, but, you know, you put on a lot of those roads, you put somebody out in the median
it's dangerous.
picking signs up, and that person gets hit, God forbid they get killed, but even worse, you know, they get injured, and, you know, we've got an employee that it's just not the right thing to do. So, I mean, it's a danger.
Well, are we doing anything other than just picking up signs? Are we calling this person that made the sign and say, listen, this is not right, this is illegal, or this is, you're putting signs in, or are we just, and I mean, I think that's the thing that we could do that could.
That's why I brought it up in terms of the ordinance bill, is
Yeah.
exactly this. If there's something that needs to be part of this ordinance that we put in place, if we're working on the sign ordinance right now, that's why I felt compelled to go ahead and bring it up. It may not be illegal, quote unquote,
Well,
right?
the right-of-way is going to be illegal.
Yeah.
Putting a campaign sign or anything else in the right-of-way is going to be illegal.
If we're worried about free speech stuff, that's what, I don't know if it's illegal or not, you know what I mean? I don't know what the state is saying is we can or can't say. I'm just saying whatever we can say, I want to say it. And so that next time we do have
And it might be
something
a
in place.
clarification at the election commission office or somewhere like that when people are, there's some clarifications to what and I think they do. I think there's some kind of clarification at the election commission office as to what the
I don't think we can, based on the lawsuit that we went through over the, you know, when the Fifth Circuit, it was Lamar Advertising. This is before any of y'all were here, but Melissa will remember this when, you know, I think it's the Fifth or the Seventh Circuit rule that you can't delineate between political speech or commercial advertising, and they were doing that in relation to the American flag by saying that the American flag is not protected under its commercial speech. So we went through, but I think when we talk about these signs, I don't think you can make a difference between political speech and commercial speech. Now, the legislature did, Representative Rudd sponsored a thing 3 or 4 years ago to do that. But if we put something in place to say you can't put anything in the right of way, and we document whether it's an auction sign, a mattress for sale, discount mattresses, but once you can be warned, and you may put a thing in the ordinance that you can be documented that you've been warned X number of times, and then after those X number of times, you're going to get fined. I mean,
Well, and the difference with the political sign is we all know somebody supporting that candidate might have decided that's what I want to do, and it's not the candidate doing it, but he's responsible because his name's on it. So, I mean, the issue is you've got to make sure that they understand the responsibility that they possess because it has your name on it. And if one of your supporters is going out there and saying, "Give me 100 signs," then you're responsible for where they go.
I mean, I could see Ronnie getting 100 of Rick's signs and going, "Man, I'm getting ready to cost this guy some money," and just go sticking them all over.
Yeah, I'm going to give you $1 for
my signs up and down Broad Street.
I'll give you $1 for every sign you put up, and give me 200 signs. So there, there's some nuances to these political signs that we needed to consider. But I agree. I mean, look on election day in front of our polling places. I mean, when I went early in the morning, there was nothing there. I went drive by the polling place at the end of the day, and there were signs lining the street. So, I mean, some of this it's part of the process. Some of it we might need to look at what kind of restrictions we have, but we can impose. But I think most of it is personal responsibility. And if we communicate expectations to those that are running, that these are reasonable expectations for you to handle. I think that's the first, to me, that would be the first step I would feel responsible doing, is what are our expectations, and do that with these candidates. Because a lot of people running for office, it's the first time they've ever decided to go out in the public. They don't know this, so when you file your petition, you have these are the expectations. If it has your name on it, you're going to be held responsible by these people for this kind of activity. That's the way I would feel to pursue something kind of responsibility on this, as opposed to some kind of ordinance or something. I don't know, but it's worth talking about, and I appreciate you bringing it up.
The ordinance thing is just to be able to enforce whatever it is we're asking them to do.
Exactly.
So to me, there's just honestly, this thing was brought it up is there's a line that you can cross on any of this stuff, and it got crossed for the last 3 weeks for me. That's all I'm saying. I think it, it just, and it wasn't just out in front of Sportscom. We know we're not supposed to put them out there, but everybody does throughout the day. And by the end of the day, there's several signs out there, and we send some folks out there and pick them all up. Mm-hmm. Right?
And then some people don't.
All in one place, in a parking lot.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is in the medians and right-of-ways, all the way to, and in front of the post office. My God, man, on federal property. That is ridiculous. So anyway.
All right, so y'all have got what we need. He's getting.
I got one more too.
All right. I need to go back to work.
I hadn't even been in quarantine. I got all this stuff in my mind.
Hey,
Quarantine is the first one.
we talked about water and sewer tonight. Council members, if I want to not vote on anything tonight, but Craig, if y'all would bring us back a budget amendment to show what it would cost to do the same thing that Murfreesboro Water and Sewer did tonight, but for the Planning Commission. So that way we would have that information and we can make an educated decision on what we want to do.
Absolutely.
We could ask Darren to bring a PowerPoint if that would work.
I got one more thing on my mind. This is a forethought here for you guys and maybe for staff. And I've done zero back work on this as far as I don't have anything prepared on this, so I have no idea where it can or should go. But there's something that just over the years has always sort of weighed on me, and I'm going to go on and bring it up so that we can start the process on this thing about, it really kind of started weighing on me more after Ronnie you made a good point as we were talking about the budget stuff a couple weeks ago for public safety. And one of the things that I've always kind of thought in my mind that might be an avenue to go down to try to offset some of the risk or whatever would be in terms of insurance. If you get hurt or killed or whatever in the line of duty, that maybe we've got a robust or at least some kind of, I don't even know exactly what exists right now, but I'd really like to know what kind of disability policy we have and what kind of life policies that we have in place for police and fire, that if they get injured and or killed in the line of duty, to me, that might be a way that if we do it, my brain, where my brain's going on this is that if you do it as a group policy, that it might be an inexpensive way for us, I say inexpensive, a relatively inexpensive way to say, okay, look, if you do get hurt or whatever, that we're able to provide you and your family with some protection, okay? So I don't know how that can be. I don't know what we currently even have in place, but it is something that I feel like might be something that could be something in addition to just a pay package or, the typical kind of benefit that might make more sense for that group. So if
Take a look.
if you don't mind, if you want to just if you want to just me and you get together and talk about that at first or whatever, and see if it's just not even possible, or if you guys are interested, we'll however y'all want to do it. Okay.
And I think the spirit of what you're talking about is, finding ways to continue to retain and attract,
right,
and to offer some incentive to our folks to make sure they know, hey, we value you here. We can't always do that in terms of pay increases because there's only so much to be spread around, but what else can we do in addition to that? So.
Yeah,
And Craig, we may want to look at that. I'm not, my guess is that I can't remember what, the last fatality that we've had as a municipality, with someone getting hurt, but we may want to look at that not just for police and fire, but an overall, if you've got someone in solid waste, or Matt Stearns was the last one I know that we've had seriously injured, where he was in a wreck 3 or 4 years ago on Broad Street on the motorcycle. But it may be something where overall that we say, if you fit in these conditions, and you're doing this type of work, if you have someone who's with a street department who's on heavy equipment, or that way we've got something in place for.
We do have, of course, workers' comp, but we also have short and long-term disability policies that are pretty good that are in place. So those apply across the board. Public safety, it's individual or unique kind of service, and so we can take a look and see what's out there that might provide that, or what we have now, and I just don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, and
we can tell you, but I do know we do have the short-term, long-term disability policies that are good policies.
The long-term, and not.
Oh, and we do have life insurance.
Yeah, the long-term policy that we have, there have been some gaps. I know one specific police officer who, it had 3 different things, that there's some gaps where there can be some issues. But I mean, that's a great thing to bring up and to talk about. So.
Yeah.
Are there any other business? Unless we get quarantined for another 14 days, which I don't think can happen, I think I've got my piece out. All right.
Good. Thank
All
you
right.
all.
Stand adjourned.